Okay, today we are going to get started with chapter 10. Now in chapter 10 we are going to talk about roots, radicals, and then towards the end we will talk about the root functions. Now basically, what do we mean by roots, and what are we going to do in this chapter? Now we have been squaring numbers for quite a long time. If we have a equals 3, let's say, and you wanted to find what was the square of a, you would basically take 3 and square it, which is, multiply 3 into itself, and you would end up with 9 as your square value. If a was, let's say, something else, let's say, how about 10? If a was 10 and you were squaring that, again, you would do the same thing, take 10, multiply it into itself, and you would end up with 100 as your value. So again, we are used to doing this. Now, what roots talks about is basically going in the opposite direction or doing the opposite process. So when you talk about roots, you're basically saying, okay, you have a square, and let's say a square is 25. So we need to find out its root. We are saying, then what is a? If a squared is 25, what will a be? And it's pretty simple. What number multiplied into itself will give you 25? And that number would have to be 5, right? So that's what we are going to try and do in this section, in this chapter. Again, if a square was 81, what would your a be? Okay, so again, what two numbers multiplied into itself will give you 81? So again, you can see the answer here would be 5 for a square of 25. And if a square is 81, your a would be 9. So this is what we want to try and concentrate on in this chapter here. All right, so let's talk about how to find square roots. Now, when you're trying to find a square root, of a given number, the first thing you have to do is find a number that when multiplied by itself results in the given number, just like I was showing you in that example earlier. And so, to give you a definition, we would say the number a is called a square root of the number a square. So let's say we are trying to find the square root of this number here. Right, let's say we are trying to find the square root of 64. Okay, so think about it. What two numbers, what number multiplied into itself will give you 64? And you can say that one square root of 64 is going to be the number 8. And that's, of course, because 8 times 8 will give you 64. So one of your roots for 64 will be 8. But now think about it. You can have another square root for 64. And what do you think that number should be? What other number multiplied into itself will give you 64? And if you think about it, that number will be negative 8. Because again, if you take negative 8 and square it, that will also give you a positive 64. So in this case, 64 has two roots, positive 8 and negative 8. And the idea is really straightforward. For any positive number, if you're going to find roots, you will always end up with a positive and a negative square root. Your positive square root is also sometimes called as the principal square root. Okay, so in this case, we would say the principal square root of 64 is 8, and the negative square root of 64 would be negative 8. Okay, so you usually use the you will usually use this symbol here Okay, we're all used to seeing this, the square root symbol, okay, for your positive your principal square root. So if we had to say, square root of 144, so basically you are saying what number multiplied into itself will give me 144, and when I use this square root symbol here, I'm saying basically that I'm only trying to find the positive or the principal square root, which will of course be the number 12. If you were trying to find the negative square root, you would use the same symbol, but you would put a negative sign in front of your square root symbol here. So for your negative square root, as I was saying, you will use the square root symbol, but you'll put a negative sign, and that tells us that, okay, you're trying to find only the negative square root, and you're not interested in finding the positive one. So I'm going to use the same number here. What is the negative square root of 144? And in this case, your answer would be negative 12. So basically what we are saying is that 144 has two square roots. Okay, you have positive 12 and negative 12 as your two roots. Now let's talk about this symbol that we are using here. Now basically you have your square root and you put the number you're trying to find the square root of inside, and the symbol itself is what we call as the radical sign. Okay, and this is a word you're going to be using or hearing more often in this section. So this is the radical sign. The number that you're trying to find the square root of is what we call as the radicand, and this whole number together, with the symbol and the number itself, the whole number is what we call as a radical. Okay, so this whole number is a radical. The sign is called a radical sign, and of course the number inside is what we call as the radicand.